Today's daf is
we have Rashi.
We are going to have Rashi. Today's daf is daf Lamed.
Any other rabbis?
We may do a little bit of Tosfos, and but we have lots of Tanaim. In fact, we're going to begin with 5 of them or 6 of them, really, because let's just say what we've done over the last few days. We've been dealing with the laws of impurity. What happens if somebody touches something that they're not supposed to, and so they become impure. And we explained that there were 5 levels of impurity. So, for example, if you have a dead sheretz, so that's going to be the av hatuma. And then somebody touches it, they become a rishon latuma. And then they touch food, that becomes a sheni latuma. That food touches other things, it becomes a shlishi latuma if it's truma. And then a revi for tuma applies only for kachim. Shlishi applies for truma and kachim. Revi only applies to kachim. And so that's the general levels. Those are the general 5 levels that we have. Av, and then 1, 2, 3, and 4. But in our Mishnah, even though we generally say that Shlishi only applies to Truma and Kachim, in our Mishnah, Rabbi Akiva taught a lesson using Vayikra Perek Yud Aleph Pasuk Lamed Gimel, and he taught that Shlishi would potentially apply even for Chulin. So, and as reflected in this opening comment, others are going to disagree with Rabbi Akiva, and that's the general position. So we're now going to have 5 different opinions that disagree with Rabbi Akiva. So we've got Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva is the one who didn't learn until he was 40 years old. And now we're going to have 5 different opinions that say that explaining that why or how we know that each of these 5 different opinions disagree. So let's take a look. We are at the top of Daf Lamed, the 5th line down, in the middle of the line. So Amar Rav Asi, Amar Rav. So Rav Asi said in the name of Rav, and then some people say the Amrila, and some people say instead Amar Rabba Bar Ben Isi Amar Rav. That it was not Rav Asi, but it was Rabba Ben Isi who said in the name of Rav. And what did they say? Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yoshua, Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Eliezer. We have these 5 Tanaim. Kulo Sivrei Lahu De'ain Sheni Ose Shlishi B'Chulin. That when it comes to Chulin, when it comes to non-truma, non-dosh, non-kodesh food, a Sheni cannot make a Shlishi. Okay? So that is in fact, again, that's how we generally understand. And these 5 opinions all agree on that. And now we're going to show each of them. Rabbi Meir Ditznan. We have a Mishnah in Para, in Maseches Para, Perek Yud Aleph, Mishnah Hey. Kol hata'un bias mayim midivrei sofrim. If you have something that requires the immersion in the mikvah because of rabbinic rule. So again, this is saying that something is tameh only rabbinically. So mitame es hakodesh, it has the ability to make something holy tameh. Now, when we say that it makes it tameh, that means that it can actually go another level. So this thing that is considered rabbinically tameh is like a sheni latuma. And so it makes kodesh tameh, meaning that it's a shlishi, and a shlishi can make a revi with respect to kodesh. Ufosel as a truma, and it makes truma pasul, meaning that it doesn't, that the shlishi is only going to be problematic. Again, this is consistent with the Gemara's language, that when it uses the language of tameh, it means that it can make something else tameh. But when it uses the language of posel, then it itself is tameh, but it doesn't have the ability to make something else tameh. Umuter b'chulin u'maser, and when it touches something that is chulin or meiser sheni, then it is completely permitted. And so we see from this statement, Divrei Rebbe Meir. That's Rebbe Meir. So we see from this statement that Rebbe Meir says that a sheni cannot make a shlishi with respect to chulin. The chachamim Osrim b'maser.
Anything
Chacham-
Kohen today?
What was that?
Kohen, remember you always were.
A Kohen? Are they going to talk about any Kohanim? No, I don't know if we're going to talk about any Kohanim today, but we'll see. Okay, so Chachamim Osrim b'Maiser. Chachamim say, yes, we agree with you, Rebbe Meir, with respect to everything you said, including the fact that if you have a Sheni, it will not make a Shlishi for Chulin. But when it comes to somebody that is Tamei Midrabanan, we are not going to allow them to eat Meiser Sheni. So it's not going to cause the Meiser Sheni itself to be problematic, but we're not going to let them eat Meiser Sheni. But the bottom line is that even the Chachamim agree that you don't make a Shlishi from a Sheni with respect to Chulin. So that's proof number one. That's Rebbe Meir. Number two, Rebbe Yossi. Rebbe Yossi had the Amran. Well, we already learned the Rebbe Yossi because Rebbe Yossi had the Kal V'chomer. He had the Kal V'chomer, as noted on the screen, from Mechusar Kippurim, right? As it applies to Shlishi in Tuma, right? Which is unfit for Truma. And so it must certainly cause another level of Tuma for Kodesh, right? Because you have Mechusar Kippurim, which is fit for Truma, but not for Kodesh. And so as a result, Shlishi in Tuma, which is unfit for Truma, should certainly cause a problem with respect to Kodesh. So, if in fact, because De'im Isay, if he were to say that a Sheni in Chulin would make a Shlishi in Chulin, well then Laiti L'Revi B'Truma V'Chamishi B'Kodesh. Well then he should have been able to learn not just about a Revi'i, but he should have been able to learn about a Chamishi. And of course, nobody says that there's a Chamishi. So that's not true. It's simply not the case. So as a result, we see that Rebbe Yossi does not believe that a Sheni can cause a Shlishi with respect to Chulin. Because again, his Kal V'chomer, the logical argument that he presented that explained how we know that there must be a Revi'i, that same logical argument, if in fact a Sheni could create a Shlishi by Chulin, it would suggest that you could even have a Chamishi by Kodesh. So since he doesn't say that, must be that he doesn't believe Sheni can create Shlishi by Chulin. Okay, so that's number two. Number three, Rebbe Yoshua. Ditnan Rebbe Eliezer Omer Ha'ochel Ochel. So now this is as a little background here. It's important to note that if you eat something that is tamei, usually, biblically, you would become one level lower than the object. Now, frankly, in general, you wouldn't even become tamei because people don't become anything less than a rishon. And so, as a result, in general, if you eat something that's a rishon, nothing bad would happen to you. But the rabbis basically created a concept of tuma, or maybe you would be you could be a sheni, but the rabbis basically created this sense of tuma that would act that if you ate it, we wanted to be extra strict because we were worried that you might eat it with something else, and so as a result, there was a following rabbinic decree. So we have Rebbe Eliezer teach the following: Ha'ochel ochel rishon, that if you eat food that is a rishon for tuma, you yourself become a rishon. Sheni, and if you ate something that's a sheni for tuma, then you become a sheni. And shlishi. Then if you ate something that's a shlishi, you become a shlishi. Rabbi Yoshua Omer Ha'ochel ochel rishon va'ochel sheni. Whether you eat rishon or sheni for tuma, you become a sheni. And this makes a lot of sense because if you eat a rishon, it makes sense that you become a sheni. And basically, we want to make you the lowest level of tuma that we can. So as a result, we're going to just make you a sheni. Shlishi, sheni b'kodesh, v'shein sheni b'truma. Well, if you have a shlishi, then you become a sheni for kodesh, but not a sheni for truma. So what does that mean? It means that if you, and Rashi helps us out here, so let's take a look in the Rashi, second wide lines near towards the bottom of the page, or actually, I guess there are a lot of wide lines at the bottom of the page, but it's the second of them, so it's near the top of that. So shlishi sheni l'kodesh, ha'ochel ochel shlishi nasa gufo sheni l'kodesh. That if one eats shlishi for tuma, it's something that's a third level of tuma, well then their body becomes a sheni with respect to Kodesh. What does that mean? She'im yiga b'Kodesh, then if you were to touch Kodesh, yitam enu, you would make that object tameh, and you do so in a way lifsol odechad, that it could even cause a revi. Bahasa mefarish taima, and there in the Gemara over there, in the Mishnah over there, that Mishnah is in Taoros. Then that tells us that that Mishnah over there in the discussion in connection with Taoros, it explains that why is that the case? The chol hanach tumaos midrabanan, that all of these are just rabbinic, and so that's what we're talking about. We're just talking about rabbinic rules. Okay, bechul and shenasa, and so back into the Gemara, bechul and shenasu al taharas truma, but when it comes to shlishi that was chulin, if it was made with respect to be the tahara of truma, so Rashi tells us what this means. Bechulin shenasa al taharas truma, because usually we say that chulin can't be a shlishi, but here we're making this was food that was made as chulin, and we're making it as if it was truma. So be'eza chulin amru, what are we talking about with respect to this chulin? Sha'ochel shlishi shalahen nasa sheni lekodesh, that eating the a shlishi of it will make somebody a sheni for kodesh. So what is that talking about? Bechulin shenasa al taras truma. We're talking about that chulin, regular food that was made in order for a Kohen to observe the laws of Truma. So let's say you have a Kohen. Now, he's not allowed to be a Shlishi of Tuma, because he's not allowed to, if his Truma becomes a Shlishi of Tuma, then he would not be allowed to eat it. Okay, all right? And so as a result, he wants to make sure that all his food avoids becoming a shlishi for tuma, and so therefore he prepares all of his food, even the non-truma food, as if it were truma. So shenasa bechulin shenasu al taras truma truma sheba'alein kohen. Oh, we are talking about a kohen, that the owner is a kohen, v'ragil b'truma, and he eats truma regularly, v'kibul alav, and he accepts on himself lachol chulin shalo b'taras truma, that he wants to always eat all of his chulin as if it were with the strictures associated with truma, kadesh yehei ragil trumosav, so that so he becomes accustomed to being careful about the treating of his food, so that he doesn't bitara, that he always makes sure that his truma stays tahor, hazukuka lahen, which is appropriate to them. Hilkach mishkachas behu shlishi debechulin acherim lo mishkachas shlishi. That so with respect to that kohen, he will have a shlishi with respect to chulin, even though nobody else has a shlishi with respect to chulin. So that's the shlishi that we say that the person is eating, and he becomes like a shlishi. But the Gemara continues, al taharas hatruma, with respect to truma, that the person can be sufficiently careful, and we're going to create the law that effectively allows his food to be like a shlishi, even if it's chulin. So al taras hakodesh lo, but we're not going to be worried about this for kodesh, because that kind of thing is less common, and so as a result. But the bottom line is now, the bottom line is alma kasaver ein sheni osa shlishi b'chulin. That when it comes to, yes, with respect to a kohen who is being extra special careful, we have a sheni and a shlishi with respect to chulin. But in general, and outside the rabbinic world, we do not have a sheni causing a shlishi with respect to chulin. And so that is the special situation that Rabbi Yoshua talks about. And so we see that Rabbi Yoshua, again, holds that you don't have a sheni create a shlishi by chulin. So Rabbi Elazar, so now we on number 4, Rabbi Elazar says, the Tanya, we've got a brisa. Rabbi Elazar Omer, Rabbi Elazar says, Shloshtan Shavim, all 3 are equal. What does that mean? That Harishon Shebekodesh, V'Shebechulin, V'Shebetruma. That when you have something that is Tameh at a Rishon level, whether that object is Kodesh or chulin, or truma. You have the same rule that applies to all three. And what is that rule? The rule is as following. Mitami shnayim uposel echad b'kodesh. That when it comes to something that's kodesh, it's got three levels more. Two more that can create tuma, so that's sheni and shlishi, and a third level where we say that it's puzzle, meaning the revi'i level. And mitami echad uposel echad b'truma. When it comes to truma, it's got two levels that it can go. It can be a sheni, and then it could be a shlishi, and that's it. And uposel echad b'chulin, and it's got one level additional and chulin. And so as a result, again, we see that Rebbe Elazar holds that there's no shlishi level with respect to chulin. So that's Rebbe Elazar. So we've got proof number 4. Now, finally, proof number 5. Rebbe Eliezer says the following: D'Tanan Rebbe Eliezer Omer. We have a Mishnah. This is a Mishnah in Chala, and so this Mishnah. So let's just back up for a moment and review a certain laws of challah. If you make a certain amount of bread, one is required to take challah from it and give that challah to the Kohen. So again, we've got the Kohen we're talking about. Forgot all about this. So we talk about, so challah needs to be given to the Kohen. Now, this challah is effectively treated like truma, meaning that it needs to be, you need to be careful that it's tahor, and it needs to be eaten in a state of tahara. And so, but what happens if in fact the dough that you are making becomes tameh? Then what happens? So, so in general, other opinions say that I think it might be earlier in this Mishnah or in another Mishnah that it highlights that if you have that when you have to take challah, you're supposed to take 1/24. However, if the dough became tameh accidentally, then you can only take 1/48. 1/48 is less than 1/24. It's half as much. And so you don't need to take as much because in the end, the dough is going to just be burned by the Kohen. And so as a result, it's not really going to be useful. So we won't make it. We won't make the person take the extra. However, if the person does it and makes their dough intentionally tameh, well, then they still have to take the 1/24. But the bottom line is that this opinion that's opinion number 1, is that if you have something that's tameh and you didn't do it on purpose, you can take less. But Rabbi Eliezer is going to say, no, I can give you a method of taking truma, of taking challah from something that's tameh, and even so have the challah itself be tahor, so that you can give that challah to the Kohen. So let's take a look and see. Rabbi Eliezer says, challah nitelos min tahora al hatmeya. There is a way that one can take challah from tahor dough to fulfill the obligation of taking challah with respect to tameh dough. Ketzad, how do you do that? You got two doughs. You got one that's tahor and one that's tameh. So you take an amount of challah from the dough that is tahor and has not had challah taken. The nosein pachos mikabetza be'emsa, and then you have in the middle, you have as serving as like a bridge. You have less than an egg size of dough in the middle. And that way you can have the 3 different piles touch each other. You have pile number 1, which is the amount of dough you need to take to take challah from the whole thing. You have pile number 2, which is less than an egg size, because if something is less than an egg size, Rashi explains that it can become tameh, but it can't transfer tuma. And so as a result, even though that will, and then you have the tameh pile. And so the 3 piles are touching, and the tameh pile will make the less than an egg size pile in also tameh, but the less than an egg size pile will not make the tahor pile tameh because it's less than a size of an egg. And so as a result, now we have even though there are essentially three piles, because they're touching, one can use the tahor dough at one end to take that as the challah for the entire dough. And so as a result, that shows that you can, that there's a way to take tahor challah from tameh dough. And so as a result, that's what you should do, is what Rabbi Eliezer is saying. And b'chachamim osrim, but the chachamim say you cannot do that. V'hatanya, and we have a brisa as we turn to Lamed Amabet, and we have a brisa that says something extra. The brisa adds that actually you don't need the middle pile of dough to be less than an egg size. It could even be an egg size. And what's the logic? Savrua, the understanding was idi v'idi b'isa rishona, that we're talking about dough that was tameh l'rishon. And so why was it that would work, even if the middle dough is bigger than an egg size? Because you have on the one side, you have the tameh dough that's a rishon. Well, the rishon then makes the middle dough a sheni. And now the middle dough would potentially make the dough that you want to take as challah a shlishi, but we know that a sheni doesn't make a shlishi with respect to chulin. And so as a result, this shows that Rabbi Eliezer says that you don't have a shlishi by chulin. So my lav b'haka miflagi. So the presumption is that this is what they're arguing about, right? They're arguing about that where even if the size is size of an egg, demar savar ein sheni osa shlishi b'chulin. Rabbi Eliezer says that a sheni can't make a shlishi with respect to chulin. Umar savar sheni osa shlishi b'chulin. Whereas the chachamim say that it's forbidden because they say that you cannot. That you can make a sheni, a shlishi can be made out of a sheni with respect to chulin. So that's one possible understanding. But there are actually two other ways to understand this dispute. And in fact, now the two other ways to understand this dispute even say that the chachamim would agree that there's no possibility of a shlishi with respect to chulin. Because what is Rav Mari, Amar Rav Mari Brei Rav Kahana, he says, the kuli alma, ein sheni osa shlishi b'chulin. Actually, everybody agrees that we don't have a sheni create shlishi b'chulin. V'haka b'chulin hatavulin l'chala kamiflaki. No, what they're arguing about here is that this is different. This is not just plain chulin, because this is chulin that requires an obligation to take challah. And since we can view that as potentially challah mixed in, maybe we could say that even in that situation, you could have a shlishi. Because once you take the challah, by the way, you can have it be a shlishi because it's treated like truma, and truma has a shlishi level of tuma. So mar savar kechala damu, right? The chachamim say that you treat that mixture like challah, meaning that it could even become a shlishi, and so that's why you can't actually cause it affirmatively. You can't cause that challah to become tameh because you're going to end up making the challah tameh. Umar savar lo. It's not like challah, rather it's like chulin, and therefore there's no shlishi level. The ibayasema, or alternatively, meaning not only can you say that, but we could even give another explanation for this argument. Really, everybody agrees that it's not like challah. And what's the machlokus about? Meaning that everybody agrees that the non-tameh dough does not have any opportunity to become a shlishi. Well, in that case, why do the rabbis prohibit you from doing this? Well, there's a problem because the middle dough, which was tahor, is now going to be made tameh. And they're arguing about whether or not one is allowed to make anything tameh in Israel on purpose. When it comes to Rabbi Eliezer, he thinks that you can make something that is tahor tameh in Eretz Yisrael, even if you do it intentionally, and even if it's chulin. Whereas Umar Savar, where the Chachamim say, Asur ligrom tuma l'chulin shebe'eretz Yisrael. You can't intentionally cause anything that is, even if it's chulin, to become tameh. And here, the middle pile of dough, which was tahor and is now becoming a sheni l'tuma, you're making it tameh. So that is, again, all these arguments, all these discussions have highlighted how at least the 5 different rabbinic authorities, plus the Chachamim, both in this last case and potentially even in our first case, all of them seem to all hold, unlike Rabbi Akiva, that when it comes to chulin, you can have a sheni l'tuma, but you can't have a shlishi l'tuma. All right, so that finishes our discussion of tuma and tara. It's a lot complicated. I recognize that. I appreciate your patience. Hopefully that was sufficiently comprehensible that you have a sense of it. But now we get on to other things. So the first thing that we discussed is are the other lessons, or the things that happened on that particular day. And on that day, Rabbi Akiva explained we had 2 different opinions about the areas around the Levite cities. So there were Levite cities that are established based on the Sukkim in Sefer Bamidbar, and you have the city itself, and then outside that you have 1,000 amos, roughly 2,000 feet, and then you have another 1,000 amos to create a 2,000 amos. And the question is, the psukim say that first there's 1,000 amos, and then there's 2,000 amos around them. So what is that talking about? What is that? And so in our Mishnah, we learned Rabbi Akiva's explanation is that 1,000 amos is for open space, and 2,000 amos is for Tchum Shabbos, meaning that you're not allowed to walk beyond 2,000 amos outside the city. That's an important limitation, outside the city with respect to Shabbos. So, however, Rabbi Eliezer, the son of Rabbi Yossi Galili, says no, 1,000 amos is for open space, and 2,000 amos is for fields and vineyards. And so now the Gemara is going to wonder, so Bo Bayom Darish Rabbi Akiva, we had this statement of Rabbi Akiva in connection with the Levite cities. So B'mai Kamiflagi, what are they arguing? So here's what they're arguing about. Mar Savar Tchumen Deoraisa. Rabbi Akiva says that the concept of 2,000 amos as a Tchum Shabbos, that you're not allowed to walk beyond, is biblical, meaning that doing so is a biblical prohibition. Umar Savar to Rabbanan, and the rabbis and Rabbi Yossi Eliezer, son of Rabbi Yossi Galili, says that no, it's only rabbinic. Okay, so that is that. Now, from there, our Mishnah then went and cited a dispute with respect to Az Yashir. How did Bnei Yisrael sing Az Yashir? So we sang this. We heard in the laning on the 7th day of Passover. We heard the Az Yashir. So that's a relatively recent experience that we had. And Rabbi Akiva said that Moshe Rabbeinu said each line, which was repeated by the people, like people say Hallel. But what does that mean? So we're going to see what that means. And Rabbi Nehemiah said, no, it's not said like the people say Hallel. It's said like the people say Shema. And so what does that mean? So the Gemara is now going to cite a brisa that explains both of these opinions, especially with the help of Rashi, and we'll have a Tosfos here as well. And then and not only that, but the brisa will provide a third opinion as well. So let's take a look. So Tana Rabbanan, Bo Bayom Darish Rabbi Akiva. On that same day, Rabbi Akiva taught. Again, now this is a brisa, so we're having additional detail about what he said. Bishash al Yisrael min hayam, when the Jewish people came out of the Red Sea, they had walked through the sea on dry land, a true miracle. Nasnu eineihem lomar shira. They saw that they had their intention. They wanted to, literally they put their eyes to it. Lomar shira. They wanted to sing shira. They wanted to sing a song. V'cheitzad amru shira. How did they do so? Kigodol hamakarias Hallel, like an adult that reads Hallel. V'hein onin achrav rashi prakim. And when you have an adult reading Hallel, the people who are there can respond with just the beginning words. So what does that mean? So we'll take a look in Rashi. Rashi says 1, 2, 3, 6, 7 lines down in the widest lines at the bottom of Lamanum Bet. Mikarehu litzibor, right? The adult is reading on behalf of the community in order to fulfill their obligation. And so Vehain onin achar of Rashi Prakim, right? They answered after him the beginning of the parak, and Rashi adds the word in his Hallelujah, that every time that they would say Hallelujah. So when we do Hallel, if a person is reading all of the of Hallel out loud, then every time that the adult reader pauses, the person should the community should yell out Hallelujah. And so that would be
that word.
that's the well, you would say it with the word with a ya sound at the end as opposed to, but the point is that you would that's what you would say in order to highlight that you agree with what is being said. As Rashi explains. Yeah, that's exactly right. Exactly. That's what we'd say. Jahu Rosh Haparsha, because that is the first word of each paragraph.
That's what they do in Catholic.
Yeah. Oh, they do that in Catholic services as well. Shahu Rosh Haparsha. I'll call Davar Shahu Omer. So that on every
like in Yankee Stadium.
Oh, they do that in Yankee Stadium too.
Okay. Yankee Stadium.
Okay. Oh, near Yankee Stadium. Got it. All right. That what they would do is after every time that the reader would say the entire paragraph, onin acharav Hallelujah, they would say afterwards Hallelujah. Ditanan b'Maseches Sukkah, because we learned in Maseches Sukkah, Misha haya eved o isha o katan makrin oto hu ona acharehen mashahem omrim. That when you have a servant or a woman or a minor read something and for you on your behalf, well, then what you should do after you hear them is you should say over the same words, because you're an adult male, and as a result, you should fulfill your full obligation by saying it yourself. But if an adult male is reading on your behalf, well, then ona acharav Hallelujah. You don't have to say the whole thing. You can just say Hallelujah. So what does that mean? So now we get the application. Moshe Amar Ashira Lashem, Vehain Omrim Ashira Lashem. Ashira Lashem is the refrain. And so Moshe begins with the refrain, and the Jewish people respond with the refrain. And then Moshe would continue. Moshe Amar Ki Goa Ga'a. Moshe would say that, Hashem is exalted, and then they would sing, and the Vehain Omrim, they would say back to him the refrain. The refrain is Ashira Lashem. So just like in Hallel, the refrain is Hallelujah, so too here, the refrain would be Ashira Lashem. And so then I'm going to sing out to Hashem. It's a beautiful thought of the way that Rabbi Akiva says that the Hallel was said in the wilderness. Rabbi Eliezer, Benoshel, Rabbi Yossi Aglili, Omer. Now we have opinion number 2, and this is a new opinion. We didn't have this one in our Mishnah. No, it's not like a gadol that read Hallel, but katan hamakri at Hallel, as Rashi explained. Right? If a katan reads Hallel, then you are supposed to repeat the exact same words after them. Vehain onin akrav kol mashahu Omer. The repetition is exactly what the person said in the first place. So as a result, the first line is going to be the same. Moshe Amara Ashira Lashem, Vehain Omrim Ashira Lashem. Right? They both say the exact same thing. But then Moshe Amar Ki Ga'o Ga'a, Vehain Omrim Ki Ga'o Ga'a. They would repeat back the word for word that Moshe would say. And so we have a back and forth exactly in that manner. Now we have the third and final opinion. And again, this is the Rabbi Nechemia that was mentioned in our Mishnah. Rabbi Nechemia Omer, Kisofer hapores al shma bebeit haKnesses. No, you're misunderstanding. They say it the way somebody who is Kisofer, and Rashi explains that the Sofer here is a milamed tinoket, somebody who teaches children. And when you teach children and they begin to know it really well, then you only need to say the first words. And once you say the first words, then everybody can say it together. Shehu poseach tchila v'hein onin achrav, that he says it first, and then they answer afterwards. And what does that mean? So let's take a look in Rashi Kisofer. It's 1, 2, 3, 5 lines up from the bottom. Second word on the line. Melamed Tinoket, right? This is somebody who teaches children. V'hu tadir b'beit HaKnesset, and he's always in the shul. Uporis al shma le'esara nehanoadim. And so as a result, he is always there ready to lead the community in Shema if there are 10 men who gather together. So Pores Lashon Parus, and it means to spread out. As we spread out the Chag before the holiday, meaning that we try to celebrate some of it early. So Matchil Bibrachos, Shilifnei Kriyas Shema. And what does it mean? It means that he begins the bracha that are before Kriyas Shema, V'hein onin acharav v'korin kulan yachad. And they respond by beginning. So he'll say Baruch Atah Hashem, and then they'll continue and they'll say Baruch Atah Hashem and continue on from there. V'kach sharsa ruach hakodesh al kulam. And so Rashi explains that what was happening in when it came to Az Yashir, that Hashem's presence, that the ruach hakodesh, the spirit of Hashem, was on all of the Jewish people. The kavano yachad, and even though they didn't have a text that they were reading, they all had the same intention. Et hashira kiksava, and they all said out, even though they had no knowledge of what anybody else was going to say. Miraculously, they all said the words of Az Yashir together. And so that's how Rashi understands it. Tosfos understands it slightly differently. So if we take a look at the second Tosfos, Rabbi Nechemia Omer, Kisofer Aporis al Shema bebeis HaKnesses, like a sofer reading the Shema in the Beis HaKnesses. The Tosefta Rabbi Nechemia Omer Kibnei Adam shekorin Shema. No, it's like a regular person who reads Shema. Shene'amar vayomru le'mor. Right, that we have both the words Vayomru and we have the words Lemor. As we'll see in a moment, Melamed Shahaya Moshe Posech Tchila. Moshe would begin. The Yisrael Onin Achrav the Gomrin, and Israel would respond with and continue the next sentence. So Moshe Omar Az Yashir Moshe. So Moshe would say the first 3 words of Az Yashir Moshe Yisrael Omrim Ashira Lashem, and Moshe and the community would say back Ashira Lashem, meaning they finish the sentence. Moshe Amar Azi V'Zimras Ka, that and Yisrael Omrim Zeke Livian Veyu, meaning they would alternate. Moshe Amar Hashem Ish Milchama, Yisrael Omrim Hashem Shemo. So again, the point is that there are 2 different views of what Rabbi Nechemia means. According to Rashi, Rabbi Nechemia means that Moshe would say the first few words and everybody would say everything else all together in a miraculous fashion. Whereas Tosfos says no, what they did was they alternated. One line would be by Moshe, and the next line by the people. The line after that by Moshe, the line after that by the people, and so on. So those are 2 different understandings of what Nehemiah was about. But now, what are they really arguing about? Meaning, why did they come to this argument? So, b'mai kamiflaki, what are they really arguing about? So, Rabbi Akiva Savar Lemor Amilsa Kamaisa, right? So we say in the Psukim, we have Az Yashir Moshe Bnei Yisrael Es Hashira Hazos LaHashem Vayomru Lemor. They said to say. So what does it mean, Lemor? Lemor al Milsa Kamaisa, that the first thing that we say immediately afterwards, that is what everybody responded, namely Ashira Lashem. So because the next words after Vayomru Lemor is Ashira Lashem. Rabbi Eliezer Benoshel Rabbi Yossi Aglili of Sabar Lemor Akol Milsa. No, when it says Vayomru Lemor, it means that that Moshe would say the words, and then those same words would be repeated by the Jewish people. Rabbi Nechemia Savar Vayomru Da'amur Kulo Bahadi Adadi. No, when it says Vayomru, it means that all of them said it. And Lemor de Pasach Moshe Beresha. And when it says Lemor, it means that Moshe began and they completed. Now, there are 2 ways that we can understand that. One is like Tosfos, Moshe began the line and the rest of the Jewish people would complete the line. Or alternatively, the way Rashi understands it is Moshe would begin the line and then the Jewish people would say that line and everything that followed. Okay, so one more little bit and we'll be done for today. So we taught one teaching in connection with the Jewish people, with the singing of the Shira at the sea, at the Reed Sea, at the Yam Suf, and now we're going to teach another teaching. Tana Rabbanan, Darish Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Rabbi Yossi Aglili taught the following: Mishah she'alu Yisrael min hayam. When the Jewish people left the sea, Nasnu einayim lomar Shira. Again, they wanted to sing Shira. But Ketzad Amru Shira. How did they sing Shira? So in some ways, this is another opinion, a fourth opinion about it. Olal mutal al birkei imo. We had babies that were resting on the knees of their mothers. Betinok yonik mishidei imo. And you had nursing infants at their mother's breasts. Taven sharo es hashechina, when they recognized that Hashem was present in helping the Jewish people at the Yam Suf and the splitting of the Yam Suf, Olol Hagbia Tzavaro Betinok Shama Dad Mipiv, they would stop what they were doing, they would raise up their neck, and even the infants, Amru, Zeh Keli V'Yanveyu, this is my God, and I will glorify him. Shenemar, as we have a pasuk in Tehillim, Mipi Olalim V'Yonkim Yisad Ta'oz, that from the mouths of young children who are already weaned and sucklings, meaning babies that are still nursing, you have established might, that we will recognize God's might, namely the might that Hashem did when splitting the sea. And Haya Rebbe Meir, Omer Rebbe Meir says, not only were the babies who are too young to talk and the who are the little children who are too young to talk and the infants who are still nursing, did they all sing Shira miraculously? Even Minayan Shafilu Ubaran Shibimeiman Amru Shira. Even the fetus inside the mom's belly would sing Shira. Shenamar, as we have another pasuk in Tehillim. This is from Perek Samechet of Tehillim, that where it says B'makalot Baruchu Elokim Hashem Mimkor Yisrael, that in a community, in a grouping. And what is that grouping? As Rashi says at the top of Lamed Aleph Amud Aleph, Kishinikalu al Hayam, when the Jewish people were gathered at the Yam Suf. And so when they were gathered, they blessed God, Hashem, from Mimkor Yisrael, from the source of Israel. And Mimkor, Rashi explains, Af Otam Shibimakor, even those that are in the place and the source. And the source is often a reference to the womb. And so this pasuk is being understood as being a reference to the womb. All right. And V'halo Chazdu. Well, one second. How could they say Zek Keli V'Yanvehu if they aren't able to see? Because an infant, a fetus inside the mom isn't able to see outside of the mom. So here's a cool miracle that also happened at Yam Suf. So Amar Rabbi Tanchum says, Heres nasa lehen ka'aspaklaria ha'me'iro v'ra'u, that the bellies of the mothers became clear like glass. And so as a result, they were able to recognize Hashem's presence. And so that's where we'll pause for today. Tomorrow, God willing, we'll finish
Heavy rain tomorrow.
I'm sorry to hear that. Well, tomorrow we're going to finish, God willing, the 5th chapter, because you can see we're very close to finishing the 5th chapter. And then this 6th chapter of Sotah is one of the shortest chapters in all of Shas. I don't know whether it's actually the shortest because I haven't gone through it all, but it certainly seems to be one of the shortest because it will end, even though it begins on Lamed Aleph Amud Aleph, it ends on Lamed Bet Amud Aleph. So it's less than one full page. So maybe we will even finish the 6th chapter. So we'll have a unique experience. So there are, I'll tell you, I think there are 9 chapters. Yes, there are 9 chapters in Sotah, and most of the chapters are many pages, but this chapter is just 1 page. So don't miss it. It's one of the shortest chapters in Shas, so stay tuned. And I wish you a Shabbat Shalom.
Tomorrow.
Do you know what's gonna be?
Sunday night we're going, no matter what the weather.
Yeah.
We're going.